This is a short story called Ace 711. Apparently, based on the notation here, it's the only story from the original manuscript of the 1939 first edition that never made it actually into the big book. Interesting. Here we go. High school studies irked me early. I was an imaginative kid, and when a small carnival came to town, it seemed pretty glamorous to me. Not very big, skinny, and looking like a victim of malnutrition, I made an admirable cigarette friend for one of the sideshows, as one of the concession men told me when he propositioned me. I had a dandy, hacking cough and looked very convincing on the platform as the spieler told the crowd how many hundred coffin nails I smoked every day, how doctors had given me up, and I surely marked surely marked for the Grim Reaper. At every telling point in the ballyhoo, I would cough as if I would croak any minute. I was tickled. I was fooling people. That idea of fooling people, which had its start with the carnival sideshow, later dominated my whole life. I was a smart guy, living by my wits, making my living by beating the other fellow. Thrown among carnival folks, I soon acquired their ways. I learned to take on a drink or two occasionally, and on one night in a middle western town got so loaded I woke up the next morning in a pig pen. How I got there, I don't even remember. I've been sick during the night, and I've often wondered why the pigs tolerated me. Shortly afterward, I quit the show and returned home. My father was a pharmacist, so I studied to follow in his footsteps. However, on the eve of taking the state board examinations, I was ordered to report for military service. Army life contributed to the formation of my character in an important way. Like most of the boys, I didn't expect to be lucky enough to be alive when hostilities were over. So I began to live from day to day. In time of war, the soldier is a gambler, and tomorrow he's something he is never quite sure about. I was never more than ordinarily lucky, and I knew I couldn't get all the money I wanted by depending on luck. So I began to master the art of manipulating dice and cards. I became passionately interested in the basic arts of the profession of crooked gambling. Conscience bothered me somewhat at first, but the voice was stifled as I soon was making more money than the commanding officer of the encampment. Soon I had a house with a lady in charge outside of government property and laid in a stock of liquor and beer. My place became so popular that I was making money such as I hadn't dreamed of. I was the only real, genuine doughboy. I was making the dough and plenty of it. The war ended and I returned home. I experienced easy living, and I certainly couldn't see a future of rolling pills and making up prescriptions from medical Latin. I had plenty of money, and in my hometown began to know and be known for the gambling fraternity, the town sports, the bookies and operators. But something kept me from making any conception with that crowd professionally in my hometown. I knew how hurt my people would be, so I lit out for pastures new. Downstate was a hell-roaring river town with almost a century-old reputation for being a gambler's paradise. It was practically never a closed town except in sporadic elections of reform administrations. I allied myself with one of the best-known operators in a saloon, dealing poker, craps, and blackjack. I made plenty of money. I developed a strong habit of stimulating myself with liquor. Even that exciting existence dulled after a time, and I felt I ought to see the country. So, finding myself a clever and congenial partner, I took to riding the named trains from coast to coast, always with the best the Pullman company could offer. I had an excellent wardrobe, the best looking baggage I could get, all the essentials for the front so necessary in the profession of a train sharper. Prohibition was now with us, and the kind of whiskey I drank was $20 or more by the quart. Our plan of operation was in the best technique, based on the opening of offering something for nothing, which is a surefire appeal to human cupidity. Traveling eventually became tiresome. I went home once more. I was now very definitely a professional, but I didn't have to tie up with any outfit in particular. Working When the mood seized me, drinking steadily every day, I did not escape the fate of every gambler, getting into trouble with the authorities now and then, but always getting by because I well knew the value of protection, which was just a business proposition with me and thoroughly justifiable. For the first time in my life, however, money failed me, and I was incarcerated for 8 months after hiring the best available mouthpiece and placing the needful where it seemed it might be good to the tune of more than $5,000. Even when I went behind the bars, I still had plenty left. 5,000 was a lot back then, I'm sure. Through influence, I became cook for the superintendent of the prison, which opened the way to liquor for me. I managed to be comfortably jingled most of the time I was in the pen. When I was out on the bricks again, I decided to give my hometown a wide berth for a while and went to one of the largest cities in the country to resume operations. I wasn't much given to contemplation. Long ago, I dropped any idea that there was a God. If I had given any thought to myself being in this world for any other purpose than to make all the money I could possibly do, I do not recall it. I drank heavily with sober periods few and far between. In this city, I operated for 4 years, during which time I was steadily slipping in any control over liquor I might have once had. I had my first experience of hospitals taken there helpless from continued drinking. The best medical talent in the city was always in attendance. Hospitals followed. I finally went from one sanitarium to another. My business still gave me considerable income. My economic position was not bad. By this time, I'd married, but that had no standing influence on me. Back I went to my hometown, and then my troubles really started. My domestic situation became very disagreeable. Gambling even almost lost its appeal for me, and that had been my life. I quit everything to take up drinking seriously. I knew that I was a drunkard and had no hope of ever overcoming the desire for liquor. That's a bad realization. Now, for more necessary to continued existence than the food I ate. Let me read that sentence again. I knew that I was a drunkard, had no hope of ever overcoming the desire for liquor, now far more necessary to continued existence than the food I ate. My wife heard of a cure at a state institution, the state insane asylum, to be frank, and unknown to me, got a court order to have me sent there. 2 deputies hauled me out of bed one day and took me to the county jail for temporary lodgment. I had my friends, and even the law didn't want. I had many friends, and even the law didn't want me to be sent to the bug house. I got as far as the county jail twice for brief periods, being released on my promise to do something about my drinking. I didn't do anything about it. When I got out, all I wanted was liquor. So eventually, to the bug house I went, assigned to the alcoholic ward. I spent 4 months there. During the time, I had no trouble getting liquor because I still had money. Again, I was released. Once out, I wrecked my car, driving while intoxicated, and it seemed that I might get a stiff jail sentence. So, when it was suggested that I might avoid that by going back to the asylum, I accepted. The bug house had no terrors for me. I knew I could always get a supply of liquor and stay half stupefied most of the time. In the institution, I became a nuisance to officials, attendants, and doctors. I had been in and out of the place so often that even the sincere professional medical men and psychologists had given up on me. Suggestion, kindness, everything had been tried. They now regarded me as incorrigible, said nothing could be done for me or with me, and discharged me in a very short time. In 2 months, I was back again. This time, I was treated like any insane person, was punished for infractions. Any branches of discipline. I could still get all the liquor I wanted through my financial reserve, and that was all I cared about. I used to talk with another inmate about his drinking business. He was a man who had lost one good job after another, had fallen from a good professional position to the status of a hobo. This fellow knew and had lived in almost every railroad jungle from coast to coast and had finally been slammed into the bughouse because his family didn't want to read about his death someday as a friendless wanderer. To me, he confessed that he had tried for years to quit. I told him I had long ago discovered that I couldn't, and that now I didn't give a damn. But this time, when I was sent back to the asylum, he wasn't there. About the middle of my last confinement, I was surprised by a visit from his fellow. He kept me in mind and had come a considerable distance to see me. I was half drunk when he called on me and didn't have even the haziest idea of what he was talking about. But he asked me if I would try to follow instructions if he was successful in getting me out. Half-heartedly, I told him I would, but I had no access to what money I had and make a real job of drinking. Let me reread that. Half-heartedly, I told him I would, but I had no access to what money I had and make a real job of drinking. Shortly after that, my sister visited me and persuaded the authorities to let me go. They were glad to do so, being sick and tired of me. They were glad of the short respite they thought my absence would give them, I guess. When I got home, doped with sedatives, I was put to bed and managed to get a little rest. The next day, my former fellow inmate and recent visitor came from a neighboring town to see me. I was very nervous and jittery, and my mind was continually on the bottle while he was talking. My natural distrust of all human beings seemed diminished a little while he was talking, for I knew his story, and we had something in common. He was pretty definite in his statements, and finally elicited from me a promise to try and follow a certain plan, which he now proposed to explain to me. He stressed the fact that his drinking career had been very similar to mine, and much more miserable because it had made him a homeless bum out of him, whereas I'd never been in straitened financial circumstances. I told him I would give it a trial if at all possible and invited him to keep on talking. He began by pointing out what I couldn't dispute, that I had no faith in anything, man or God, that all my life I had lived as I pleased, without any moral scruples or misgivings whatever. I admitted that I had. What you need is a definite religious experience, he said. That's the bunk, I said. I knew there was some angle like this. Count me out. If I got to turn around and join a church and sing hymns and holler amen, when some long-bearded Jasper who spends 6 days out of the week skinning suckers legally begins to pray in meeting, I don't want any part of it. You don't have to do that, he said. And anyway, the long-bearded slicker is no concern of yours. Your problem is yourself. My friend was new to this job of helping the other fellow, but I couldn't get away from the fact that he was now sober and that he had got that way and was being kept that way by a religious experience. He made me a proposition. I'll come for you Wednesday night, he said. I'll take you to where a bunch of guys who used to be picked practically all the time meet every week. Let me reread that. I'll take you to where a bunch of guys who used to be pickled practically all the time every week. You can see and listen and judge for yourself. With my friend, I attended that meeting. I was cordially received. I knew a good many of them and listened attentively, but I say quite honestly, it left me cold. Not that it was like a church service. No, it wasn't like that at all. When some stories had been told that ended up with the Lord's Prayer, then everybody sat around and visited. I was beginning to get a little scared. Now I thought is when they'll put the works to a guy. About this time, one of these mugs is going to get me in a corner and ask me about my soul. Nothing of the sort happened. They invited me back again. Others asked if they could come to see me when I'd be in and so forth. My pal stuck pretty close to me that week. Some of the gang turned up at my home and told me how they had been helped to quit drinking. I went back to the next meeting and the next again. Gradually, I began to see what it was all about. I listened carefully, for I was not definitely interested. More or less unconsciously, I was seeking for something. I didn't know it then, but I was surely seeking God. Now, I didn't find God suddenly. You must remember that God was never in any of my plans. The former cynical, gambler, slicker, who didn't even believe much that there was honor among thieves, gradually learned that love is the law of God. I, who had strictly followed the injunction that you should never give a sucker and even break, had to learn that God demands we be honest if we're to follow his teachings. I'm writing this in the Thanksgiving season. It's a great privilege to have the fine human friendship and association of this gang of former drunks. It was an even greater privilege when I can be of service in helping some guy to remedy which is his for the taking. But if friends and fellowship were to disappear tomorrow, I don't think I would be dismayed. Back of all that there is, they acknowledged that I have a divine Father. Let me reread that. Back of all that there is, the knowledge that I have a divine Father, that as long as I try to walk as he has laid down for me to do throughout my life, nothing of ill can befall me. That if I wish, I can be sober for the rest of my days. I have a simple little job in which I make less in a month than I formerly made in a day, but that doesn't worry me. I know there is something far better than mere dollars. There isn't a gambling house of note that wouldn't be glad to have me as an operator, for the owners know I'm capable, that I can bring and keep business. In fact, some who know think I would be a greater asset than ever, for they have confidence that I would make an honest accounting of receipts. No, I don't have much money nowadays, but I don't need any. I'm quite sure that God doesn't want me to go back to the green tables and the shaded lights again. It might even be possible that I could go back to my former profession and stay sober, but I doubt it. Accustomed to coldly calculating the odds all of my life, I'm of the opinion that they would be definitely against me. His will must be my bet. There's no other way. It's a great story. Join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as there is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and forever. Amen. From ages to ages.